The Daughter of Jairus. The story of the healing of Amos, the madman from Kheresa, had already reached Bethsaida and Capernaum, so a large crowd was waiting for Jesus when his boat arrived that Tuesday morning. Among these people were new observers from the Sanhedrin, who were sent from Jerusalem to Capernaum to find grounds to condemn Jesus in order to stop his influence. While Jesus was speaking with the people who had come to greet him, Jairus, one of the leaders of the new synagogue, made his way through the crowd, fell at Jesus' feet, grabbed his hand, and begged him to come quickly, saying, "Master, my little daughter, my only child, is dying at home. I beg you to come and heal her." When Jesus heard the father's plea, he said, "I will go with you." On the way to Jairus' house, they were followed by the large group of people who had heard the father's request and wanted to see what would happen. Just before they reached the leader's house, as they were hurrying through a narrow street and the crowd pressed around him, Jesus suddenly stopped and exclaimed, "Someone has touched me." The people standing behind him denied that they had touched him, and Peter said, "Master, look how crowded it is here. Isn't it natural that someone might bump into you?" Jesus replied, "I asked, 'Who touched me?' because I felt that living energy went out from me." While Jesus looked around, his gaze fell on a woman, and when he looked at her, she felt exposed and came forward. She knelt at his feet and said, "For years I have been afflicted with bleeding. I have suffered much and been to many doctors, spending all my money in search of a cure, but no one has been able to heal me. Then I heard about you, and I thought, if I can just touch the hem of his garment, I will surely be healed. So I waited for you until you came close enough for me to touch you. I grabbed the hem of your garment, and I was healed. I know I am cured." When Jesus heard this, he took the woman by the hand, helped her to stand, and said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." It was her faith, not the touch, that made her well. This case is a good illustration of many seemingly miraculous healings that occurred spontaneously during his earthly ministry, which he did not consciously intend. In time, it turned out that the woman was indeed healed of her disease. With the faith she had, it was only necessary to be near the person of Jesus. It was not at all necessary to touch his garment. This was merely the superstitious part of her belief. Jesus called this woman to him to correct two errors that might remain in her mind. He did not want this woman to go away thinking that her secretive action, by which she tried to steal her healing, had been rewarded, or that touching his garment had anything to do with her healing. The touch was merely superstition. Jesus clarified to her and all the bystanders that it was only her pure, living faith that had accomplished the healing. Due to this delay on the way to his house, Jairus became understandably very impatient, so they hurried on at a faster pace. But before they had reached the leader's yard, one of his servants came out and said, "Your daughter has died." But Jesus seemed to ignore the words of this servant. He took Peter, James, and John with him inside. He turned to the devastated father and said, "Do not fear, only believe." Inside, the family members were crying and wailing. Jesus told the mourners that the girl was not dead, but they laughed at him unbelievingly. After sending everyone out of the room, he took the father, the mother, and his 3 apostles to the bed where a girl about 12 years old lay motionless. Jesus now turned to the mother and said, "Your daughter is not dead. She is only sleeping." Jesus walked to the child's bed, took her by the hand, and said, "Daughter, I say to you, wake up and get up." When the girl heard these words, she immediately stood up and walked around the room. And shortly after she was freed from her sleep state, Jesus ordered that she be given something to eat, for she had been without food for a long time. Jesus gathered the family and explained to them that the girl had been in a coma after a long period of fever, and that he had merely awakened her from it, but that she had never actually died. He also explained this to his apostles, but it did no good. They all believed that he had raised the girl from the dead. Whatever Jesus said had little effect on his followers. They were eager for miracles and seized every opportunity to attribute another miracle to Jesus. Jesus and his apostles returned to Bethsaida after he had explicitly instructed them to speak to no one about it. Jesus' reputation as a healer was at its peak around this time. Sick people came from far beyond the borders of Galilee. Everywhere he went, the sick were waiting for him. The Master now looked very worn out, and the apostles were worried about his health. Even Jesus' apostles could not understand the nature and characteristics of this God-man. It should therefore not difficult for you to imagine how confused the ordinary people who looked up to him must have been. For the simple common folk of that time, it was incomprehensible. A normal-looking man, just like them, who embodied all the divine attributes and creative energies, in control to transcend time and material at will. Nor has any subsequent generation been able to appreciate the greatness of his life and the depth of his message. The material miracles ceased after he left this earth, but you, child of man, must be aware of that you, through faith, can access his spiritual power. Jesus has left your material world, but he is present as a spiritual influence in the hearts of people. By leaving this world, Jesus has made it possible for his Spirit to dwell alongside the Spirit of his Father in the consciousness of all people.